All right, welcome in Inside Golf Podcast, Arnold Palmer Invitational Betting and DFS Preview. Absolutely one of the best events of the season. If you are new, I know a lot more people are turning into golf right now with football in the rearview mirror. I do my best to break down everything that you need to know about this golf course, Bay Hill, how it's going to play, what skills really matter this week, other similar golf courses that you should be looking at as a reference point, and then go over my model, the players I'm really high on relative to market. I often talk about whether or not this is a good week to take on Scotty in DFS or not, based on the format of the event and the golf course, of course. I have a lot of thoughts on Scotty this week. And then, of course, some of the bets that I will be looking to make when Bookmaker and Bet Online come out. Like I've talked about, this has been a theme on this podcast early in the year. I'm glad that DraftKings is putting out odds early on Saturday afternoon, it seems. It gives me more to talk about on the podcast. It gives us a better sense of where I'm at versus the market. But I would not recommend betting into this market. If you have access to a bunch of other books, there's going to be a very select number of cases every week where maybe you get CLV on one or two guys if you bet early into that DraftKings market, but it's pretty rare nowadays. I would kind of call it the crack addict market because they basically can just get away with putting out a market with a really high hold and hope, that Dave Chappelle meme got any crack where he's kind of scratching his neck. You're kind of hoping for those people that absolutely just need to get down on somebody on a Saturday night. That's why it's there. The only cases where I would suggest betting into this market are two instances. If a guy is playing this week and you think they're absolutely going to nuke on Sunday, and then you also want to bet them the following week. So say, for example, you really think that Ryan Gerard is going to have a great Sunday at the Honda and like backdoor top 10. And you also think that he's going to win the API, then go for it. If that happens, you'll probably get CLV. Or case number two is if you can predict how data golf is going to model, which I think I can, based on looking at the radar plot, you can at least get a sense of who they're going to be higher on, lower on. And if you have a strong feeling that like data golf is going to love this guy, because a lot of the recreational books don't just move to action anymore. They move to data golf odds, FanDuel being a good example of this. So if there's a player that based on data golf's predictive modeling, you believe that data golf is going to love this guy, they're going to make his odds lower than whatever DraftKings is at, then go for it, right? But even somebody like Matt Fitzpatrick is a good example of this week. We'll talk about Matt Fitzpatrick, who from like a modeling standpoint, basically breaking my model. And that's going to happen to a lot of other people's model too. Like that's not going to be a super unique take that my numbers, even though this year I'm modeling like a very different way that I have in the past, I still think if you're like modeling with BetSperts, it's going to do the same thing with Matt Fitzpatrick, right? And if Fitz was sitting there at 35-1 on DraftKings, I would say, look, my numbers love this guy. Your numbers probably love this guy. Everyone's number is going to love this guy. Bet it. But DraftKings already seems to be snuffing stuff like that out. They have Fitzpatrick as the 5th favorite on the board at 27 to 1. He's lower than Hideki. He's lower than Henley, lower than Morikawa. And like my numbers going to be higher on the guy. They think Fitz should be like the 3rd favorite this week behind Rory and Scotty because my numbers seem to be obsessed with him. But however, DraftKings is setting their odds. Like I said, they've pretty much already snuffed out the fact that Fitz is going to be super popular and look good in everyone's model. So does 27 to 1 really even feel like you're getting a good number on him? No, I wouldn't expect, I wouldn't have expected the market to put him above Hideki, DraftKings to put him above Hideki, who's been phenomenal this year, or Henley, who is still a top 7 player in the world via data golf and won this event last year, or even Morikawa, who won a signature event this year and almost won this event last year. In the past, you would have felt like, okay, my modeling has a clear edge on Fitzpatrick based on the way that he's been playing. You know, he didn't even finish top 20 at Riviera compared to some of these other players. My numbers are going to be like way higher on him than the market. And just unfortunately it doesn't work that way anymore. Like the wild, wild west of golf betting. We talked about this a lot on our Wednesday night show as it pertained to like, who are the players that are chalk in DraftKings now compared to who are the players that would have been chalk like 3 years ago in DraftKings. And it's so different. The game has changed so much. This has been my full-time job for 3 years. I've had this company for a little over a year now where I'm like in the weeds with so many DFS players every week. And like how we get to certain players, how we model. And I think it's still changing. I think there's like another revolution that's coming even more so with advanced analytics and how we model. But like the players that we like, the way that we are coming to figure out who's a good play and who's a bad play has changed so much in the last couple of years. There's just such an influx of information, some bad information, but a lot really good, to be honest with you. Like I would love to come on here and tell you that like this is the only show that does a good job. ISN shows are the only shows that do a good job. They're not. There's a lot of people that do a really good job doing this. The average golf podcast is way sharper than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. So even in a situation like Fitz, it seems like DraftKings has somewhat arbitrarily put his number already lower than I really would have expected based on the players that he's already ahead of. And that just feels like a clear, the guy who's making odds on DraftKings is like at least looking at like some modeling the way that a lot of bettors and sharp DFS players are looking at modeling in those days where you're going to find these giant discrepancies in certain players. It's changing. You got to find new and different ways. You got to evolve. I've had to evolve a lot this year as well, compared to some of the stuff that I was even doing in the way that I was breaking down golf courses last year. I felt like was getting a little bit archaic and I needed to start looking at different things and figure out where I was going wrong and so on and so forth. That's obviously a tangent and a podcast for another day. Really interesting topic though. I may do a podcast with somebody about like what's changed in how golf bettors approach the market, how that's affected the market, how data golf's getting more into betting and DraftKings has affected the market, and how chalk is different now than it was a couple of years ago. But anyway, very quickly on the Cognizant, I had the one thing in DFS happen to me this week that you pray never happens to you. but is always on the table. And I guess you kind of map out for it to happen once, twice a year. So hopefully I met my quota this year on it happening. But it put a huge damper on my week, and that was Will Zalatoris withdrawing after a walk. I was a pretty big Zalatoris fan this week. I thought it was a really sharp play. I was really happy with that. He was a core play for me in my single entry. And the second that happened, I was just like, this week's over. And the rest of it wasn't over. The rest of my pool cooperated quite well. The rest of my core, Shane Lowry was a big stand for me at the top over Gerard and Thor Jorgensen and whatever. There weren't a lot of good players priced at the top. Lowry was still quite high owned, but he's winning. Mac Hughes, T30. That's good. Hopefully he can finish top 20. Nikolai Højgaard, T23. That's good. He was pretty highly owned though. And if Lowry wins tomorrow, I can still salvage a good week. But the Zalatoris thing, coupled with the fact that it's just been insanely good weather in LA this weekend, like the type of weather where you just feel like you're doing something wrong if you're not on the golf course, I kind of checked out and found myself more engaged with getting excited about Bay Hill and getting prepared for Bay Hill than watching the golf tournament. And I still have plenty to root for tomorrow. A couple really good Lowry, Mitchell, Ricky Katz lineups to root for. I'm not on Nico Echeverria, but I'm rooting for him because he was kind of a big ISN play. I know a ton of our subscribers and my friends and staff are on him. But as soon as the Zalatoris thing happened, it was just like, well, it's going to be one of those weeks where you're playing a little more defense than offense in DFS and kind of hoping more to salvage profitability as opposed to feeling like you can really run downhill and your core can put you in some good positions. And that's kind of what it turned out to for me. So I don't really have much to say on the golf course either. Steve's been absolutely crushing the round scores, and that continues to be without a doubt the most profitable way to make money in golf. If you ask me, that I have seen in all my time doing this, is following Steve's round score bets that he breaks down in our Discord and that get emailed to all of our subscribers at ISN. Like, if you're not tailing these, you're just missing out on a huge opportunity to pad your bankroll for golf. I was pleasantly surprised with how the golf course stood up on Thursday and Friday. Today, the golf course played more like the Cognizant we've seen the last 2 years. I think there's going to be a little bit more wind on Sunday. We've already been kind of breaking down the pins in the Discord, and looks like there's some tougher pins. But after all the rain that they got this afternoon, it's probably going to look a little bit more like Saturday tomorrow than it did Thursday or Friday, unfortunately. I do think round 4 is going to be a little bit tougher than round 3. And it's a weird leaderboard. Lowry, like, generally can't close a door on Sundays. But this sets up really nicely for him based on the players that are around him. He should win. That would be the best outcome by far for me, outside of like Ricky Katz or Mitchell. Wouldn't count on that. And don't know how much I'd count on Lowry either, but I think it will be a good finish. I'm not sure if I see anyone running away with it. I think it'll be at least minimum entertaining. Okay. Arnold Palmer Invitational. Another signature event, our third of the season, and 70-man field as of now. One of the few signature events that will also feature a cut. I'll kind of talk about how that affects whether or not to play Scotty Scheffler. I think the difference between the Scotty question in DFS when there's a cut in a signature event versus not a cut in a signature event. I think that changes things a little bit. I'll talk about why that is. But regardless, Bay Hill is one of the best tests of skill on the PGA Tour. And, you know, while I have my qualms with Florida Golf and Dick Wilson architecture, this golf course does an excellent job of separating the men from the boys. And it is one of maybe the two remaining golf courses on the PGA Tour schedule that you can count on this in Muirfield Village to play over par. Last year, Russell Henley won at 11 under over Morikawa. He was 45-1. Shout out Kyle. Scoring average was plus 0.43. Scotty Scheffler, 15 under par over Wyndham Clark. He won by 5 strokes. Scoring average was plus 0.37. 2023, Kurt Kitayama Rager won at 9 under par over Rory McIlroy and Harris English. Kitayama was 250-1 that year. That was before it was a signature event. Scoring average was, or excuse me, it was a signature event that year. Scoring average was 0.61, plus 0.61. 2022, when it played insanely hard, Scheffler -5 over Billy Horschel -4. They almost lost the golf course that year. Golf course is not going to play 2 strokes over par again. Scheffler was 18-1 that year back in the day. And 2021, Bryson, the year that he tried to drive the green on the par 5 on 6. He was 11 under par over Lee Westwood -10. Bryson was 13-1. The scoring average that year was plus 1.09. So if you take out 2022 and 2021, the last 3 years, it's played right around almost half a stroke over par. I would expect that to continue this week. I'll talk about why that is. The golf course, as I mentioned, was designed by Dick Wilson, 1961. Arnold Palmer renovation in 2009. Par 72 measuring 7,466 yards. TIFF Eagle Bermuda grass greens measuring 7,500 square feet. Fairways are perennial ryegrass overseed. Rough is perennial ryegrass overseed 3 inches. Bunkers, there's a lot of bunkers on this golf course, 84 sand bunkers. Water comes into play on 9 holes. Quick note, 2025, the beach bunker on 17. You know, that big beach bunker that kind of guards the front of the green in between the green and the water, that was removed in exchange for short grass. And after playing 1.7 strokes total over par, 0.17 strokes over par in 2024 and 0.13 strokes over par in 2023, it played 0.81 plus 0.81 last year. So this added over a half a stroke to how difficult the 17th hole played. That was a really good change. I'm glad they did that. Okay, on to the golf course. So Bay Hill has been a staple on the PGA Tour since the 1970s, and it kind of epitomizes that tough, windy, water-heavy, firm, flat Florida golf like few others can, you know. And despite featuring par 72, Bay Hill is a more challenging golf course than PGA National that we saw this past week, largely due to the fact that, you know, they really allow the rough to grow out 3+ inches sometimes. It usually starts at 3 inches at the start of the week, but by the end of the week, sometimes they don't really mow it. And along with Muirfield Village and Torrey Pines, it typically ranks as the hardest par 72 on the PGA Tour. And for my money, I think it's the hardest of the 3. I think it's the one I'd have the most difficult time on. And when it gets really firm and windy, like 2020 and 2022, the golf course is nearly impossible, which I kind of like, actually, and plays not every week, but I like it once or twice a year. And it, you know, it plays just as challenging as a US Open. In 2020, when Tyrrell Hatton won at 4 under par, it was the hardest golf course that they played all season, including the majors. And 2022 came close as well when Scotty Scheffler won at 5 under par. Now, this has not always been the case at Bay Hill. Following Rory McIlroy winning at 18 under par in 2018, a guy named Chris Flynn took over as the head superintendent. If you've been listening to this podcast for a couple of years, you know exactly who Chris Flynn is. Chris Flynn is a hero. Every golf course needs a Chris Flynn. Every PGA Tour event needs a Chris Flynn. Among the changes that Flynn made as superintendent, widened the mowing lines a little bit, removed, which started to test accuracy more, removed much of the rough around the hazards, which made it easier for balls to roll into the hazard, shaved off areas around the greens, making it easier for balls to roll farther away from pin collections into collection areas. There's still a lot of thick rough around these greens, but there's some short grass too. And making the rough that they did have even longer. Now, post Flynn, 2019 on, it's one of the 3 most difficult golf courses on the PGA Tour every year. And again, Muirfield Village is probably the only other regular PGA Tour event that does a better job of testing total driving. I would have, like I said, zero interest in playing this golf course myself. It looks insanely hard the way that they set it up. I mean, it would be even harder if they didn't overseed the rough, but even with the overseeded rough, it's brutal. And the golf course works. Like, it's a very good setup, not because it has creative architecture. It's really flat, but rather because like it's figured out, like these are the things that you have to do if you want a golf course to play over par on the PGA Tour, you know, and they're still reliant on wind and firmness and those things I think are going to cooperate for the most part this year, but you really need at least 3-inch rough. You need water. You need really fast greens. And then obviously the 2 variables that really determine whether it's going to be an easier Bay Hill or a really hard Bay Hill is how much rain the area's gotten and how much wind you're going to get. And what kind of makes Bay Hill such an incredible test of professional golf, unlike Torrey Pines. I think it's a better test of professional golf than Torrey Pines. I think it would be, I'd rather watch a major at Bay Hill than I would at Torrey Pines. It's not a pure distance fest or anything close to it. Similar to like a Muirfield Village, and Marco Simone is another good example of this, which hosted the 2023 Ryder Cup. It tests accuracy almost now more than it tests distance. And give me a very balanced skill profile at Bay Hill with a more focused emphasis on driving accuracy than distance and long iron play. I know this has been a golf course where Rory McIlroy and Bryson DeChambeau have been unbelievable. It's also a golf course where Tyrrell Hatton and Jordan Spieth and Russell Henley and Colin Morikawa and Corey Connors have been unbelievable as well. And if you look at the 10 best players at Bay Hill over the past 20 years, it's a really interesting list. It's a list of great players, but it's a really interesting list. Scotty, Tiger, Eduardo Molinari, Bryson DeChambeau, Rory, Tyrrell Hatton, Jordan Spieth, Sung J M, Corey Connors, Francesco Molinari. Molinari brothers love to hear. There's a little bit of everything in that list. Like, you have some true bombers, Tiger, Rory, Bryson. You have a couple of like super accurate drivers of the ball. Sung Jae, Corey Connors, like one of the most accurate drivers on the PGA Tour. The Molinari brothers in their day. And then obviously the two guys at the top of the leaderboard last year, Russell Henley and Colin Morikawa. And then you have guys with super elite short games like Hatton and Spieth and Rory and Tiger and Scheffler for that matter also. And I would say in the case of Scheffler, Tiger, probably Corey Connors, probably Tyrrell Hatton, and certainly Francesco Molinari in his prime. Those guys are all super, super elite middle to long iron players. None of those guys are specialists. None of them are one trick ponies. They're all like really complete golfers. Generally, their worst skill is putting. And I would also say, like, even including Spieth, generally way better ball strikers than they are putters. And if you go back a little bit further, like outside the top 10, you get Sergio Garcia's played really well on this golf course. Henrik Stenson has been pretty unbelievable here. And you start to look at the slope, and outside of 2024, where things were a little wonky, it's an above tour average slope here, which means that better players are separating at an easier rate than they would at a regular PGA Tour course. In 2022, when the golf course played insanely hard, slope of 1.32. So that's the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, the golf course played really hard, but it didn't get stupid. Like, it was a test that separated better players from worse players. It didn't teeter that edge of it becomes so dopey and hard and ridiculous that it turns into random short game. And Bay Hill is not that. I'll talk about why short game matters a lot here, but it's not exactly predictive based on the thick rough. So it's just a very, very good test of professional golf. Like, I would never want to play this golf course, but man, it's a lot of fun to watch. And man, a lot of golf course should take a look at what Bay Hill does, because it's not a super difficult model to recreate. Like, it's a very flat piece of land. There's not the greens are not super undulating. They're just fast. And take some notes on what Bay Hill does, because I know that the lack of rain and the wind are a decent part of what makes it really, really hard on the harder years. But even without super, super firm conditions, they get some showers from time to time. We'll talk about the weather now. Like, this is kind of the blueprint that you need if you want a PGA Tour event to play consistently over par every year. You need a lot of thick rough water, and hopefully the firmness and wind is additive to that as well. If you look at the weather, the last 3 years, the scoring average was very similar. And each year we're kind of looking at, like, this is something you can count on in Orlando. 10 to 20 mile per hour winds this year. 2025 last year actually saw some really, really brutal gusts on Thursday when the course played 2.6 strokes over par. That was awesome. And last year was the firmest year as well. And kind of the yearly totals of rainfall that we've gotten this year, well below the typical average, about 2 inches below the typical average. And it looked like it rained a bunch today in Orlando, but between now and the entire end of the tournament, no rain and consistent winds of 6 to 15 mile per hour with gusts of 25. That's not crazy. That's not me saying this is going to be a harder Bay Hill than the last 3 years, but it's going to fall in line with the last 3 years, where the course has played a half stroke over par. I would expect us to be in the ballpark of that this week. We'll see when we get a little bit more of an accurate weather forecast, but that's where I'd be at right now on Saturday. And this part of Florida has been even drier than typical. So I'm pretty optimistic that's going to play tough. Kind of underestimated the firmness of PGA National the first 2 days, and how quickly things can dry up in Florida compared to, how quickly things dry up in California with that cloud cover that we get and the lack of humidity. We're going to see temperatures in the mid 80s all week, wind gusts up to 23 mile per hour in the afternoon. These are good conditions, nothing like crazy, wonky 2 strokes over par conditions, but like good conditions. Should play half a stroke over par, and fall in line with what we've seen the last couple of years. So if we answer the question of, is this a distance, accuracy, both or neither golf course? Each of the last 2 years, Bay Hill has either strongly favored accuracy or favored accuracy, but the prior 4 years beforehand, it's favored bombers or strongly favored bombers. Now, if we really start to zoom out and look at the in-event correlations and the predictive nature of this golf course, I would rather have you be accurate here than I would long. And the top of the leaderboard showed that big time this year. So, well, I'll get into it when we talk about 2025, particularly with how this trend has been the last 2 years. But the answer to the question is, this is a golf course that tests both. Both distance and accuracy matter here. And each of the last 5 years, it is ranked top 5 in off the tee difficulty. The fairways are about 32 yards wide, ranking middle of the pack in width. And the missed fairway penalty has been top 10 each of the last 3 years. The rough penalty has been top 5, 3 out of the last 5 years. And it also ranks top 12 every year in fraction of missed fairways that result in a penalty stroke. So if you want to test distance on the PGA Tour, the number one thing that you have to do, just make the golf course long. If the golf course is long enough, then distance will be tested. If you want to test accuracy on the PGA Tour, it's a little more complicated. You have to basically do 2 things, and Bay Hill does both of these things. You need to make the fairways wide enough that players actually have a chance of hitting them. Bay Hill does this. The last 3 years, it's ranked between 12th and 17th lowest driving accuracy on tour. So these fairways are hittable. And then you got to give them a high rough penalty, and also make large misses more penal than small misses. Bay Hill does this. Torrey Pines doesn't. Because there are plenty of holes at Bay Hill where if you miss small, you're in the rough. That's bad. But if you miss big, you're in the water. So it's a great driving golf course. And distance is always more predictive than driving accuracy, because driving accuracy is a more volatile statistic. But in the event, accuracy had a much higher in-event correlation bump. So to answer the question, it's a both for me, but certainly more towards accuracy. As compared to tour average, accuracy has had a higher in-event correlation at Bay Hill each of the last 4 years. And last year, 8 of the top 10 ranked top 30 in driving accuracy, and only 3 of the top 10 ranked top 30 in driving distance. It's usually not that big of a gap, but for how long the golf course is, it's not even that high of a driver usage percentage golf course. And proving that, guys will tell you it's really important to hit the fairway here. You need to be playing from the fairway. And that's what happens when you get firm greens. When you get firm greens, driving accuracy always matters a lot more. The importance of driving accuracy always increases anytime you have firm greens, because it becomes so much harder to control the ball from the rough out of firm greens. Okay. What type of proximity buckets should we be looking at? Or I don't really look at proximity buckets anymore, but what average strokes gained approach per shot, what ranges should we be looking at? 150 to 200 yards is 37%. It's a little bit higher than tour average. And then 200 yards plus, 29.5%, a little bit higher than the tour average is 27%. So, give a little bit of a bump to 150 to 200 and 200 yards plus, both above tour average here. Each of the last 6 years, the greens in regulation percentage has been below 57%. And this has been one of the top 5 most difficult courses on approach from greater than 150 yards. Being a good mid to long iron player, very, very important this week. Okay, let's take a quick break and then run through, kind of put a bow on the golf course and then talk about my model, early leans, how afraid we are of Scotty Scheffler this week. Okay, so we've already talked about how you want driving accuracy and driving distance, a little bit more accuracy than distance, but you really want to be good at both. You obviously need to be pretty proficient from 150 yards plus. And if we take a 5-year average of the variance decomposition, this is starting to support what we understand of this golf course already. The PGA Tour average, 15.1%. Bay Hill, 18.3%. Off the tee in the event, more important than the PGA Tour average. Approach play, 33.2%. Tour average, 34.9%. Right around average in approach play. Off the tee, I think, is eating a lot of that. This is a lot more of a first shot golf course than it is a second shot golf course based on the missed fairway penalty, where off the tee at a golf course like this becomes almost as important as approach is the most important thing every single week. Bay Hill is an example of a golf course where that gap between approach and off the tee starts to get really narrow because off the tee is so important. Around the green, way higher, 17.9% compared to 14.4%. That's just about the same difference between off the tee, where around the green is that much more important to the same degree that off the tee is at Bay Hill. That's what you're going to get on a golf course where the greens in regulation percentage is one of the top 5 lowest on tour every single year. It just around the green is based on pure volume. It's going to make a big difference in this tournament with a really low greens regulation percentage. And then what takes the flack for all of that? Putting, 30.7% compared to the tour average of 35%. So approach around average, off the tee, 3% higher than average, around the green, almost 4% higher than average, putting minus 5% compared to the tour average. Now, if we look at the in-event correlations, tells a bit of a similar story. Off the tee, higher than the tour average, around 21.8% compared to 20.5. Approach, right around tour average. Around the green, a little bit higher than tour average. And putting, 3% below tour average. Now, if we look at the predictiveness, okay, 2 different things we're looking at here. What actually matters in the tournament? What is predictive in the tournament in terms of like the guys that are good at this coming in? Do they play well here? Off the tee, a little bit higher than tour average. Approach, a little bit higher than tour average. Around the green, that's the one that's lower than tour average. And putting, right around tour average. Okay, so if you kind of take all of these 3 things together and use predictiveness as your baseline, and then take a look at in-event correlations and variance decompositions, probably want to be somewhere at, for modeling purposes for projections, 31.2% off the tee, which is very high, 32.6% approach, 17% around the green, 19.2% putting. Off the tee, 2% higher, approach, 0.1% higher, around the green, 0.5% higher, putting, minus 2.4%. And putting kind of gets trimmed because both correlation and variance decomposition say putting is less important at Bay Hill than tour baseline. Off the tee gets bumped because both correlation and variance say off the tee is more important than tour. Baseline approach stays kind of the king as usual. Predictive already has it high. Variance supports that pretty nicely. And then around the green is kind of that tension point where, the correlation and variance say high, but the predictiveness is low. So speaking to around the green is kind of that tension point where in the tournament, this really matters, but it's very hard to predict who's going to be good around the green. This is essentially because when you have very thick rough, there's a lot of randomness, and around the green actually becomes a lot harder to predict on golf courses where you have thick rough. Just look at the other ones. Torrey Pines has a little bit of this too. So does Muirfield Village, where it's like in the tournament around the green, really important. In terms of predictiveness, really hard to predict. So guys like Victor Hovland, Corey Connors, they tend to have a lot more success at golf courses like Bay Hill, Oak Hill, Olympia Fields. Oak Hill and Olympia Fields, 2 golf courses that I would look at this week as reference point. There's a reason for this. Around the green skill is dumbed down when you have super thick rough around the green. And basically everyone is just doing that same slide the ball under the rough, pop it out motion, as opposed to like really flexing their muscles with, their hands and skill off of short grass. So that's why you see around the green predictiveness go down. So I would say, like, in terms of predictiveness, the things that we could really control, yes, around the green is going to be important. You have to get a little bit lucky there. But what we really, really want is great total drivers of the ball, accurate, long, great middle to long iron players. And then for around the green and putting, like the way that we're going to try and predict it is look a little bit more at specialization in terms of like who's performed well out of thick rough, who's performed well at Bay Hill in the past, who performs well on Bermuda greens. So around the green really matters in the tournament when the greens regulation percentage is so low. It's just a lot harder of a skill to predict on this golf course than approach and off the tee, which is why approach and off the tee are like really on this golf course. It's one of the most important ball striking golf courses on the PGA Tour in terms of the predictive value of ball striking for this golf course. And Bay Hill's a very difficult putting golf course solely because the greens are incredibly fast and feature grain. The greens are also extremely flat, feature very limited contouring. And so I have a pretty below average weight on putting this week at Bay Hill. It's not typically a golf course where players can sun run on the greens. It's simply too challenging from tee to green. So much of the separation is created via ball striking. Of course, there's always going to be a player every year with substandard ball striking that gets crazy hot on the greens. But I have a lower than average weight on putting. There will certainly still be one player who cracks the Bermuda code, but this is the exact opposite of a putting contest. 3 of the top 4 putters last year didn't even finish top 15 in the tournament. As has been kind of the par for the course during the Florida swing, you want to look at kind of the best Florida players in this field. I'm also looking at how players have performed on difficult conditions. Firm greens are important. And very similarly to, Torrey Pines, it kind of falls in that long and difficult bucket. But I would not comp this to Torrey Pines because the greens are so different. Like putting on fast Bermuda, the opposite of putting on slow POA, just a different skill, like different players that those types of greens suits their eyes differently than the guys that are POA specialists. Muirfield Village is really the one that you want to look at because that tests total driving. I'm not a huge Quail Hollow fan this week. I would look at golf courses with thick rough. I'm not a huge Riviera fan this week. I would look at golf courses with very thick rough that have fairways wide enough to test total driving. So winged foot doesn't really work because that's just bombing gouge. Oak Hill works a little bit more. I like Oak Hill. I think Oak Hill is a very good golf course to look at compared to Bay Hill. But Muirfield Village Olympia Fields, that would really be the gold standard. And if you look at the guys, like I put together, even the harder years at PGA National too, even though the rough isn't as thick. But if you look at like, if we combine Oak Hill, and even looking at the top of that Oak Hill leaderboard, just anecdotally, Corey Connors, Victor Hovland, Kurt Kitayama, like those are all Bay Hill guys. And if you start to look, Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, even though he wasn't in good form. And if you look at like Olympia Fields too, and combining Olympia Fields and Muirfield Village and some of those harder PGA National years, you're getting a lot of Scotty, Colin Morikawa, Rory McIlroy, Matt Fitzpatrick, Shane Lowry, Victor Hovland, Jordan Spieth, Russell Henley. Like it is all Bay Hill guys. And course history, it's a really high course history correlation week. Even higher than Riviera now. It is, or excuse me, not just behind Riviera, third highest predictive nature of course history on the PGA Tour, behind Riviera and Augusta National. So it's my third highest weight on course history that we'll have all season. Last year, the only debutant that finished top 15 was Jacob Bridgman, who finished 15th. Kurt Kitayama, though, legend, won it as a first timer in 2024, or excuse me, 2023. So, okay, so I put all of this together in a model. I break down the actual weighting of this model, modeling a different way this year. I have learned a lot about, I'm very excited about the way that I'm looking at this year. I think it's a lot more accurate than some of the stuff I was doing in the past. All that is in my extensive article. I'm just going to run through the players, you know, kind of the top 20 rankings, and then how that correlates to the top 20 ranking is in a model should not be your top 20 on the odds board. You should place some sort of conditional win equity kicker based on like their data golf rank or something like that. But I have created, you know, the top 20 in my model, and then an odds board based on a conditional win equity kicker, and we can compare that to DraftKings odds. So for me, I have Scheffler, Fitzpatrick, and I have to be honest, almost embarrassed to admit how close Fitzpatrick is to Scheffler. If I tweak a couple things that I may actually want to, he honestly could get to where Scheffler's at. Now I'm trying some different things in terms of sample size for stuff, and Scheffler has been struggling recently on approach at like what he is normally amazing at, which is gaining strokes on approach from 150 yards plus. Scheffler is usually amazing at that, and he has not been as good at that to start the year. And so, like, if you took a long-term sample size, Scheffler would be one here by a mile. But if you're trying to capture like who is hitting their irons right now the best from 150 to 200 yards, that is a current weakness of Scheffler. He's not bad, but he's just not, he hasn't started out the year where that iron play from 150 yards plus and his ability to separate and gain strokes on the field via that skill hasn't been up to snuff. Riviera, he struggled quite a bit with that. So Scheffler, Fitz, Rory, Hideki, Colin. I love Colin to keep playing well this week. Russell Henley, Siwoo Kim. I love Siwoo Kim to like, he kind of had his 2 bad weeks. I still think he's going to be, he's playing great golf. I think this is a week where you can comfortably get back on Siwoo Kim if you gave him a rest at Riviera like I did. 8 Patrick Cantlay, big whatever for me, man. You know, interested as a DFS play, but I think he's winning right now. Tommy Fleetwood 9, always intriguing. Xander 10, my guy Harris English 11, 12 Adam Scott, 13 Victor Hovland, who I have lost so much money on Victor Hovland at Bay Hill and Pebble Beach. I always get so excited to bet Victor Hovland to start the year. I don't know, man. I just like, my problem with Victor Hovland right now is when you're a really great player, like obviously Scotty goes without saying, Rory puts up the occasional dud, but not that often. Xander is amazing at this. Like Tommy Fleetwood has gotten really good at this. They just don't like finish in the bottom 20 at signature events. Like they just don't do that. Like Xander, even if Xander's playing bad, like he is not showing up at a signature event and finishing in the bottom 20 of the field. Fleetwood is not doing that. They have a built-in floor. Scotty's obviously not doing that. Rory's not doing that. Hovland just like fucks around and finishes T45 in signature events, and it's really off-putting. Like it's really like, dude, you're going to Pebble Beach and Riviera, two golf courses that are ostensibly like very good fits for you that you've played well at in the past. What are you doing? What are you working on? Why are you finishing outside of the top 40 at these golf courses? I'm not asking you to contend. Like, I'm just saying, like, if you're a top 10 player in the world, Xander, Tommy, say what you want about how much they win. They never do that. They never do that. Rory does it very rarely. Rory never really does that. Even when Rory has bad weeks, he still finishes T25 in a signature event. Hovland to start the year, just after showing some really good signs at waste. Anyway, Jacob Bridgman, 14. Can he keep it going? He's great on Bermuda. Iron play is amazing. Put some respect on Jacob Bridgman's name. I was surprised that he was 55-1 on DraftKings. I thought that was a pretty good number for Bridgman. I don't think he's winning this week, but Corey Connors, great course history here. 16 Ludwig. He showed some nice signs at Bay Hill, or excuse me, at Riviera. I'd be interested in 17 Shane Lowry. I often play Shane Lowry at Bay Hill, and he's obviously in contention to win this week at Honda. 18 Keegan Bradley, who I think it's a nice bounce back spot for. I like Keegan at this course. 19 Jason Day. Also think it's a good bounce back spot for Jason Day. 20 Sepp Straka. Also a good bounce back spot for Sepp Straka. So let's talk about Scotty first and then Fitz. I mean, I will say this right now about Scotty Scheffler. I haven't gotten on a podcast and picked Scotty Scheffler to win a tournament this year. Didn't pick him at the Amex. Didn't pick him at Phoenix. Didn't pick him at Pebble. Didn't pick him at Riv. I basically, and then, you know, mileage may vary in DFS. I played him 50% at Pebble, at Phoenix, and at Amex. Full fade on him at Riviera. Have not bet the without market every week. This is the first week where I think Scotty's going to win. Like, I would pick him to win. If you have $50 and are just asking me like who's going to win, I think Scotty's going to win this event. Now, there are a couple of reasons why you could make a case against it. Talked about it a little bit. His iron play hasn't been peak Scotty levels. In 2026, over 150 shots he's hit from 200 yards plus. He is 38th out of 70 players in this field in average strokes gain per shot from 200 yards plus. A little bit better from 150 to 200 yards. He's 22nd. His short game has been as good as it's ever been. His putter has seemingly improved. He is the best total driver on the PGA Tour. So the case against, and this is the first real golf course like TPC Sawgrass, very much like Muirfield Village, where accuracy off the tee is very important. And Scottie Scheffler, still very accurate driver of the ball, driving the ball great to start the season. Unlike TPC Sawgrass, it's also a golf course where distance is important. Scottie Scheffler, like, his distance is right there. He's 15th in distance, 17th in accuracy, first overall off the tee when you combine them. So this is a golf course that really, really, really is going to allow Scheffler to separate with his driver. His iron play doesn't have to be perfect. Really allow him to separate with his driver. Around the green, Scottie Scheffler out of thick rough. He's been very, very good. Golf courses with thick rough: Bay Hill, Muirfield Village, Oak Hill, a couple of US Open setups. He's been very, very good out of thick rough. Oh, and by the way, he is the fourth best putter in this field over the last 6 months. He has been unbelievable with his putter. He putted terribly here last year, but he's been fine on fast Bermuda before. He's putted well here enough times, even though he did putt poorly here last year. But there's nothing in his lead-in putting form that would make you say worried about him getting lost on the greens. He may not putt to his baseline this week, but it can't be an anti-case for Scheffler. So this is the best golf course that Scottie Scheffler's played for him all year. And every time it's been about 3 events since Scottie Scheffler's won, feels like he's due. So for me, I mean, I'm not really in the business of just like betting Scottie Scheffler plus 300, but I would be more on this golf course. I'd be more interested in the without market this week. I think you make a better case for the without market this week. I got to compare numbers and he might be able to just make better on top fives with your guys. I think he's going to win this week personally. Now, Matt Fitzpatrick, this is the guy that you're going to hear about all week from, I bet, other pods. I doubt I am going to be the only one sharing such a positive sentiment on Matt Fitzpatrick. And for reasons like this, he might be a guy you want to bet Monday morning and watch out for that DraftKings ownership. He might be like a better bet than a DraftKings play this week, depending on what ownership gets. But the guy is driving the ball great. He's hitting a lot of fairways over the last 3 months. He's 3rd in approach. He's 9th in around the green play. Putting has been the weakness, but if you look at his long-term Bermuda form, he's excellent. And very much unlike Scottie Scheffler, this is what would tick him up way higher in a model for me than Scheffler. This year, from 150 to 200 yards, Fitz is 4th in this field in gaining strokes on approach, 18th from 200 yards plus, gaining strokes on approach. Quite a bit better than Scottie Scheffler. Not to mention the fact Fitzpatrick has 4 top 10s and 11 appearances at Bay Hill, runner-up 2019, 7 top 25 finishes and 11 appearances. He's been outstanding here. I watched him at Riviera. I walked the back 9 on Thursday with him with my friend Chris Powers. We both bet Fitz. That was when it looked like Fitz could win. He's awesome ball striking, lost 4.2 strokes putting. This year, he's gone 63rd, 9th, 14th, 24th. He won the DP World Tour Championship in November. The iron play has been outstanding. He is hitting a ton of fairways. He has great history on these thick, rough courses, great at Olympia Fields, great at Memorial, great at Bay Hill, obviously, great on fast Bermuda, hitting a ton of fairways, gaining 1 million strokes right now with his irons, and specifically from 150 yards plus. What's not to love? I think he is the most sensible pick you can make to win this golf tournament. Now, the sensible pick rarely ever wins, but if I'm just purely following the data, Fitz makes the most sense to me. Okay. The other guy that we haven't really talked about that, and I make the way Fitz is playing right now, I make him sub 20-1 at this golf course. Third favorite behind Rory, who's the next guy I would talk about. Rory McIlroy, really don't want him to get shortchanged here. I went super, super heavy on Rory over Scotty at Riviera, full fade on Scotty, core Rory. The reason I did that, twofold. I thought it was a better golf course for Rory based on how Riviera favors distance. And I think when you have a cut in these signature events, based on the salary that Scotty Scheffler is going to be, you are going to have a harder time getting 6 of 6s with the average salary that Scotty Scheffler leaves you, because there's going to be 20 guys, 15 to 20 guys that miss a cut. And the vast majority of them are going to be in the 6K range. The guys that you have to play with Scotty Scheffler. Oh, by the way, it's a way smaller 6K range this week at a signature event. It's going to be way harder to get different with Scotty Scheffler. And you're also going to have to use the guys with the lowest made cut percentage. You flip that on its head, signature event with a no cut, you should jam Scotty, because all of those guys in the 6K range with the lowest made cut percentage, all those guys have a 100% made cut percentage. Signature events with a cut is the worst format to play Scotty Scheffler in DFS, in my opinion. Now, that question gets a little bit more complicated because the golf course is really good for Scotty Scheffler this week. It's not the golf course great for Rory McIlroy too, but what's the one thing that Scotty does absolutely better than Rory? Driving accuracy. He's a better putter than Rory and a better chipper than Rory. We'll talk about the approach play. But put it this way. I like Rory's advantage over Scotty at Riviera, despite how amazing Rory has been at Bay Hill. On paper, I still like it as a golf course, just in a vacuum, more for Scotty Scheffler than Rory. And that's for his 11 appearances at the API. He's never finished worse than 27th. Like, we're splitting hairs. It's really just that driving accuracy that does it for Scotty. Rory's finished 21st and 15th the last 2 years at Bay Hill. A little underwhelming, but he's been outstanding here, particularly with the ball striking. So it might actually be like a very good week to play. I might use Scotty in one and done. Maybe a very good week to play Scotty in one and done and bet the without market and play Rory in DraftKings at that lower salary, because it's a golf course that separates skill big time. I think a lot of the players in the 6K range are going to bust. I think skill is going to be separated here. And if you play Scotty Scheffler, you are going to have, you're going to have to play a lot of the cheap guys. Now, you could have kind of gotten away with that at Riviera because it turned into more of a putting contest, and, you know, Bridgman ended up winning. If you played Scotty and Bridgman together, you did fine, but Rory was really the play at Riviera too. And that golf course didn't separate skill the way that Bay Hill's going to. Rory looked amazing at Riv. 3.2 off the tee, 5 on approach, 1.9 around the green, 1.6 putting. He looked a lot better than Scotty at at Riviera, gained over stroke in all 4 major categories. Really solid, well-rounded performance for him. His irons have looked very good. And if you look at Rory, 9th off the tee this year, 9th in approach, 3rd in distance, 49th in this field in accuracy. He still finds a way. 30th and around the green, 20th putting. That's really like 20. Those are the big categories that Scotty's going to beat Rory in: driving accuracy, around the green play, and putting. But on any given week, Rory can putt better than Scotty. Rory has not been good gaining strokes and approach from 150 to 200 yards, but he's been very good 5th in this field, gaining strokes from 200 yards plus. Sorting by this, because it helped me quite a bit at Honda. It gave me, it helped me get on like Mac Hughes and Ricky Katz were quite good at this at Honda. If you look at the players from that 100, the guys that are top 25 in this field, let's say better than field average, 150 to 200 and 200 yards plus right now, getting the lion's share of their approach from this range. Siwoo Kim and Ryan Gerard have been the best in the field. Makes a lot of sense why those guys are playing such great golf this year. Matt Fitzpatrick, Ricky Fowler, makes a lot of sense why Ricky Fowler has been playing such good golf this year. Kitayama is really highly up there, more from 150 to 200. Sepp Straka is really highly up there. Daniel Berger might be a name to watch out for. Hideki, obviously. And then 2 other names I would watch out for are Harris English and Ryan Fox. Fox, great play for us at Riv. I think there's another very good golf course for Ryan Fox. So I think kind of where I'm leaning is, maybe Fitz in the without Scheffler market. Probably has to be a bet for me. And then some of the other guys I'm quite high on is, let's see who EV wise for me. Siwoo Kim, I like quite a bit. Even though, God, his odds on DraftKings are 30 to 1. Come on. Siwoo Kim, and I would also be very, very, very interested in Harris English this week. I was huge on Harris English at Riviera. He was good, not great, could have been better, but Fitz, Harris English are definitely 2 guys I would be interested in. I like Morikawa a lot too. I think that I don't think he's going to win another signature event. I just think he's like a solid DFS play. I like this golf course for Morikawa. I like the fact that around the green, less predictive here. He's been very good on thick, rough courses, very, very good at Muirfield Village, very good at a couple of US Open venues. He is driving it so straight right now and hitting his irons incredibly well. So I'm quite high on Morikawa this week, and maybe I think it's a good spot to deploy Scotty in one and done. I know some people would say the players, obviously that's great, but the odds of Scotty winning this event are a lot smaller than the players. Players has a double the size of the field. I guess the other one and done Scotty argument is the Masters, which has not that much bigger of a field. He got the same chance to win this as he does the Masters, I guess. Probably not though, because of the live guys. So, yeah, I think Scotty's going to win this event. And if he doesn't, Hopefully it's Fitz or Harris English. I this could be a really good golf course and event for like a Rory Scotty showdown. Please leave in the comments or DM me if I'm missing something. I can't think of like many times at all if it's ever been like if they've ever had a true showdown where it's kind of them on the back nine, and this would be a perfect spot for it to happen. Amazing golf course for both of them. They both played amazing here. They're both playing amazing right now. They're the two best players in the field. I think it's a golf course that really separates skill at the top. I really think we're going to see a great leaderboard this week. And if you want some long shots, watch out for Ryan Fox. I also like Cameron Young. Watch out for Daniel Berger. And if we want to go deep down the board, watch out for Chris Kirk. Alex Norton, I don't mind either. Okay, that will do it. Went a little bit longer, just had a lot to talk about with Bay Hill. I love this golf course. Hopefully this preview helped you out. Hopefully you are ready to do battle with the markets on Monday morning, and enjoy the golf on Sunday. If this podcast helped you, leave a review on Spotify or Apple, and even just a thumbs up on YouTube really goes a long way, helps a lot more than you know. And if you want a much deeper look to be part of our wild, crazy community at Inside Sports Network with a bunch of like-minded golf bettors that just really care about having fun and making as much money as possible and do quite a good job with it, InsideSportsNetwork.com. We would love to have you as part of that community. Feel free to DM me as well if you're a new member and want to see what it's all about. We'd love to have you. With that, enjoy the golf on Sunday. Super excited for a great stretch of golf with Bay Hill and the players. And I will see you back on this podcast feed Monday to go over DFS pricing with Brian. Cheers.